This has been like my go-to pike fly over the years, and it's not anything that I've invented. I've taken this off of many amazing fly tyers I've learned over the years who are esox aficionados with flies, and I'm going to go through step by step on how to tie this fly to help you catch more fish. The first step, obviously, is to get your hook in the vise. And the hooks that I use 90% of the time for my pike flies are Gamakatsu B10S 2-aughts. And we're gonna walk you step by step all the way to the head of this. We have our hook in the vise, and I'm gonna start with yellow. And the reason why I'm using yellow is we're gonna make a fire tiger pattern, kind of perch pattern that has been really amazing over the years. It has hooked a lot of both pike and musky, specifically pike. So we're going to start with yellow. We're going to do a straight tie off the back of this hook. And if you stick with me throughout this whole video, you will see step by step of there's a reason why we're doing everything the way we're doing it and how to balance that fly to make it really push water and also dance and pause and kick to really get that fish to trigger to eat. So the first step on the tail on my Gamakatsu B10S is a straight tie of bucktail. And we do not need a reverse tie yet. We're just going to do a straight tie off the back of the hook. And this is going to start to create the tail and the action. And you know, just a straight tie is pretty simple versus a reverse tie. But what I like to do here on my tail is not use too much material on the tail. You want to go lighter on the tail versus on the head, so when it pushes water off the head, it really kicks and creates a vortex in the back. So we're just going to do a straight tie of yellow to start to create our fire tiger pattern. So we have the straight bucktail tie, and then we're going to come over here with probably about 4 feathers I'm going to use on the tail. And what I'm going to do is always keep those feathers, you know, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches off the tail, off the bucktail of the back of the fly, because that really creates that flutter. Also gives the fly some size without overusing material where you're casting too much you're trying too hard to cast a heavy wet sock fly. So the longer tail feathers off the back create the illusion of a bigger target for a pike or a musky. And I'm just tying them off each side, and I'm using orange. Obviously, we're doing the fire tiger pattern as I mentioned earlier. And now we're going to grab some green just to kind of give it that contrast. So here we're going to put a green feather on the top of the tail to kind of fill it out. And as you can see, it's still 2 or 3 inches off the bucktail to create that flutter and that illusion of a bigger target for your species to get excited to eat. And it will save your arm at the end of the day where we don't have bucktail stacked back here. It's real thick. This will create thickness for the tail in a very natural way. And again, Zap-A-Gap's our friend. I go through one of these Zap-A-Gaps probably every 15 or 20 flies. But it works, it makes them real durable, and the fly really holds up and material does not pull out. And the brushable Zap-A-Gap helps you get really precise. So we got 3 feathers. We're going to add 1 more feather just to give it a little bit more volume. This is a thinner feather. And you could play around with your feathers as far as how you like to lay them. I like to lay them around the hook as much as I can. And I separate that there and get that feather locked in. I could feel the glue is still on there, so I don't need to glue that again. Now we're going to use some crystal flash. So far we've got 1 straight tie of bucktail. We've got 4 feathers to create that length. And now we're going to just put some flash. And I like to put flash on both sides of the material rather than just straight back. kind of do that loop technique, lock it in with your finger, a couple wraps. Spread that back on both sides of the material. So this is really the only artificial material that I use in my pike and musky flies is flash. And you could use any type of flash that really kind of calls you or you feel that looks really nice and complements the fly. But this is the only artificial material that I'm going to use on this entire fly. I might put a little bit in the head, but that'll be it for the tail. Again, a little Zap-A-Gap, brush it right on there, lock it in for life. Okay, now we're going to start the reverse tie, bucktail reverse ties to finish the tail, and that's going to give it a little bit more bulk. So we're going to use another piece of yellow to kind of give it that yellow, and then we're going to continue with the yellow, and then we're going to kind of finish it off with orange and maybe a little green. Again, fire tiger, just think of a perch. So now I'm just going to cut a nice, decent chunk off, not too thick, of some yellow. So like, as I said, I really like to have the tail a little thinner as far as material goes. So the head, we're going to use thicker chunks of bucktail to kind of create that pushing of water, and then also create that kick. And I believe that the less material you use on the tail on this articulated pattern, the better off you're going to be in the long run. Okay, so we kind of tied the bucktail forward because we're going to do a reverse tie here. I'm just going to trim off the excess. And again, this is for an articulated standard kind of pike fly that has been very good to me over the years. And this pattern color is going to be what I call fire tiger. And again, this is nothing new. A lot of people have been doing this pattern and this style for many years around the country. A lot of esox aficionados. But this is the one that I really gravitated towards as I tried a lot of different patterns. So the reverse tie is something that you just kind of have to perfect over time. It's not an exact science. Again, as I said earlier, my flies are not the prettiest flies in the world, meaning, they're very durable. They swim really well, and I've learned how to balance the amount of material and the positioning of the material so it really is castable, still pushes a lot of water, is durable, and really dances in the water to kind of trigger that fish to eat. So what we're doing here with the reverse ties, we're just building up a thread dam, and as we're working that material back, what I like to do is dab a little Zap-A-Gap so that thread doesn't fall forward, and then I can control how I want that bucktail to lay back. So it's not laying back too high, it's not laying back too flat, where when you're stripping it through the water, it pencils, the fly pencils, gets real thin. So we're trying to create a little bit of an arch, so to speak, in this bucktail, and putting Zap-A-Gap on the thread really helps. And this is going to be my last reverse tie, and we're going to be finished with the tail here. I'm going to build up the thread so I create a little bit of a valley right there where I can lay that next reverse tie so it doesn't fall forward and cover the eye of the hook. And I'm going to finish this off with a little orange. And again, you could watch here how I kind of set up this last patch of bucktail to finish the tail of this articulated fly. Kind of just getting out the scraps and the small pieces there. I'm going to lay it in that valley that I just described. Kind of get your thread tight in there. Maybe give it a couple spins to kind of get really wrapped tight. I'm just going to get the tips of this orange. I'm going to make sure that thread sits right in that valley. I'm going to wrap around slow, maybe 3 or 4 times, so the material of the bucktail doesn't fall off. And then I'm just going to work it around the hook. And then as I work around the hook and start to pull down, you'll see it start to spin. So it's really setting up in that valley. And again, I'm kind of getting that in there. It's nice and tight. A couple more wraps, make sure it's locked in. And then this is where you start to work and massage this bucktail to lay how you want it to lay to finish off the tail. Okay, so we're going to finish off the head of the tail. that an oxymoron, head of the tail? But we're gonna get that in there and get that thread working. Now, like as I said earlier, we're gonna kind of push this down, kind of get that material bent a little bit, kind of break the stems of that bucktail. And then we're gonna get our Zap-A-Gap. I'm gonna put a little Zap-A-Gap to keep that thread locked in so it doesn't fall forward. And it also allows me to, there goes my cat, build that thread up on top of itself. So we're done with the tail. It's pretty much that straightforward. Our Gamakatsu B10S, a straight tie of bucktail, 4 feathers, some flash, 2 reverse ties, and as I alluded to earlier, this Fire Tiger articulated pattern that I'm going to show you the rest of step by step here has been the most durable, well-actioned fly that I've come across from all the people that I've mentored under, and it just has a lot of amazing action, and it's durable as hell. So as I showed at the beginning of this video, we're making an articulated pike fly, and as you know, we already tied the tail. So this is a finished fly that has been around for probably 4 years, and still, as you can see, it's still held up. And off the tail, we're going to have a split ring to a barrel swivel to the shank. And that's the part that I'm going to show you now. So we have this is going to be the head of the fly. So I'm going to take my barrel swivel, which in this case, I am using a VMC 65-pound size 5 barrel swivel. And then we're also going to use a VMC split ring, which is 88-pound, and it's a size 3. So here is the shank that I bent myself. I'm going to take the VMC barrel swivel, and one end is looped and one end is open. So I'm going to take the barrel swivel and I'm going to slide it onto the shank, as you can see there. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wrap this and get this locked in. And then I'm going to connect my split ring to this barrel swivel, and then the tail that we tied to the split ring. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to lock this barrel swivel in. And again, as I always say, Zap-A-Gap is your friend, and I use the brushable. So I think that's going to be sufficient there. That's pretty locked in. That glue is going to dry over the next couple minutes, kind of warm it up, dries a little faster. Now I'm going to show you how to attach the barrel swivel to the split ring. And your best friend in this situation is going to be your split ring tool. So you want to just kind of get that little pointy part of the split ring tool into that barrel swivel eye and just slide it right in there. Gonna work it around. And one of the keys to this is to make sure that the eye of your barrel swivel is wide enough to have the split ring float in there freely. Then we're going to take our tail, and again, you could even do this after you tie the front of the fly or the head of the fly. You could attach all this afterwards. I like to do it while I'm tying the fly sometimes because I can really see what we're working with as far as what the tail size is and what the length is and what the body material as far as the thickness. So I like to attach it first as I'm tying the fly. And again, this is not an exact science. These are not factory tied flies. You know, not everyone is the same. They all come out a little bit different. So now we have the tail that we tied. Attached to that is our split ring to our barrel swivel to our shank. So one of the reasons why I love the hook to the split ring to the barrel swivel to the shank is I do believe, and again, this is not my concept, I've gotten this from other fly tyers, is I love the way it spins naturally, and then also if you're fighting a fish, it doesn't wear a hook in a hole in their mouth quickly. It kind of spins as they body roll and head shake. And those who've caught pike and muskie know that they do that viciously. The other thing that I love about this concept is you could replace the tail. You can keep the head, which I'm going to show you how to tie here in a second. You can keep the head and always replace the tail, because what happens with pike and musky flies is these hooks get extremely dull over time, and you're always sharpening them. And sometimes if it just gets that worn out, or the material does eventually come off. But you could go ahead and you could replace these tails, and you can keep the body and all the hardware, where all you have to do is just pop off this tail off the split ring and tie a new version of the tail. So now we finished the tail. We connected the hardware. Now I'm going to show you step by step on how to finish the head of this fly. And this is the most important part, because you really want to create that balance in the fly. So we're at the head of the fly. And as I alluded to earlier, this is where we want to build the head a little more bulky than the tail. But we also don't want to use too much material where it's really hard to cast. It absorbs a lot of water. So there's a happy balance here that I'm going to try to explain the best I can to get this fly to push water, to really dance in the water column with that tail kicking as you're stripping. And this is what really kind of ties it all together. Just to kind of sidetrack here also, I'm going to use this little woman's hair clip to hold the tail of the fly back. And as we are going into, we're going to make the first reverse tie for the head of this fly. And I'm going to start to use a little bit more material than I did in the tail. As I've been saying, I'm going to make the body a little bit thicker than the tail, so it really pushes water. And this first section is going to be green to kind of complement the Fire Tiger pattern. And you really want to get towards the back, but you don't need to get all the way to the back. And as long as you have good bucktail, which I'm going to make a future video on selecting bucktail, as I said, as long as you have good bucktail, you can fill this gap in properly. And honestly, if there's a little bit of a gap, meaning like you can kind of, it's a little bit see-through, I don't think a pike or muskie that's following it or about to eat it and kill it is going to say, oh, that doesn't look real because I can see a little bit of a barrel swivel in there. So that's not a problem. So this whole head of this fly is going to be all reverse bucktail. And I might put a little bit of flash in there, and maybe just a couple feathers just for an accent and some extra action. But this first reverse tie, it's important, as you're going to want, as I said, is you want to kind of fill that gap in a little bit. And I always like to trim here, if you can, just to kind of get that excess, the butts of that bucktail out of the equation. And again, we're trying to push water, but we don't want to overuse material where these become uncastable. You know, one of the balances with guiding and getting people in my boat that don't do this every day is to design a fly that's castable and that has amazing action and also is durable and can be used every day. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of crimp those butts of that bucktail, kind of get that to lay back. Kind of going to build up that thread in front of the reverse tie. And what I like to do here is I like to kind of start, you know, off the bucktail and build up some thread and then slowly come back. And as you're coming back on the reverse bucktail tie, you want to go loose, because if I start to crimp down hard on this bucktail, it's going to flare versus lay back. So the softer you come back and build up, so now I'm going to come a little bit forward and then back again onto the bucktail, so it's going on evenly. And I'm doing loose wraps as I'm getting on top of that bucktail so it doesn't flare, because I want to control how it lays back. See how it's starting to lay back now? We're going to use our brush of Zap-A-Gap, which is our friend. I'm going to put a happy little glue there, as our buddy Bob would do, a happy little tree. Happy little Zap-A-Gap. And then I'm going to just loose wrap it, and this is going to control how it lays. Because like I said, I don't want this to lay back too flat. I want it to puff out. So as you strip it through the water, it'll then eventually lay back and kind of puff back out and undulate as you're stripping it through the water. So this is a pretty good layback that I have going on right now. And then I'm going to put a handful of additional reverse ties, and it's going to start to build on top of each other. This is not that thick. I'm going to go thicker as I go forward because I really want the head of this to be thick. And we are going to do another reverse tie here. And we're going to use green again, and then we're going to go to a little bit of yellow and then orange and black for the head to kind of replicate that fire tiger / perch pattern. So we're just working this second reverse tie. So we're going to just put a little zap-a-gap again on here. And we've got it almost where we want it to be laying. Just going to do a couple more turns on this. And like I said, you don't want to go like really crimp down here because it's going to flare, not lay. So there's a big difference between flaring and laying. So I think we have that where we want it. I'm just kind of visualizing what that's going to look like in the water. As you can see, it's going to cover that barrel swivel. It's going to cover that split ring, and it's going to blend into the tail of that really nice. So now we got this laid back exactly where I feel it's going to really swim well and start pushing some water. Now I'm going to throw a couple feathers in here just to give it some contrast and a little bit more action. Now this is not 100% necessary. I believe like some of these steps are more for the fishermen than the actual fish, but it's a confident thing. And fly fishing for pike and musky, for those who are kind of new at it, a lot of this is all your confidence in the fly. If you're casting a fly on a 8 weight, 9 weight, 10 weight, 11 weight, 12 weight all day, that fly has to capture your attention, and you have to have confidence in that fly. So I like a little bit of balance between tying a fly that looks really good and acts even better in the water. So I'm just going to throw those couple feathers in there just to give it a little action, a little extra flair. And now I'm going to build the head. So what I did here is I'm doing a two-tone or two-color scheme on the head. Putting black on the top, I'm going to put yellow on the bottom. So I took a decent-sized chunk, but not too much because we have to put some on the bottom. And I'm going to pinch that with my fingers and get the head of this, top of this fly dialed in. And what I want to do is just kind of secure it, but not too tight. Okay. Now I'm going to flip this over. And again, you don't have to do it this way. You can just do one color for the head. But I like the way that this really looks in the water. It gives it that contrast. Kind of gives it the top of of a bait fish or a perch. In this case, where the top of a fish would be a darker color than the bottom. You know, you can use white here. You could use something, but I'm just kind of going with the fire tiger concept. As I said, probably 17 times. You're probably sick of hearing that, but okay. So this is going to be like the throat. So once I get this semi-locked in, I'm going to flip the fly back over. And again, you could just do one color reverse tie, but I'm getting a little fancy here. Now I'm going to pinch with my fingers, and now I'm going to start to pull on that thread to get this to lock in where the yellow is on the bottom and the black is on the top. Now again, this doesn't have to be exact. I don't really think a fly needs to swim, at least for pike and musky, swim perfect. So now that I got this locked in, I am actually going to use just a dab of Zap-A-Gap. And the problem with Zap-A-Gap and bucktail, it absorbs extremely fast. So that's going to kind of get in there and lock it in. I'm going to let that just kind of set for a second. Kind of lock it down. There we go. All right. Now here comes the hard part. To get this to balance properly, we're going to work this head back, this reverse tie, and because we have two different colors and we have a lot of thread in there, this is not well done as far as some fly tyers and how they use their thread. But again, we're looking for durability, and we're looking for it to swim with amazing action. I've got this material worked around almost like a pinwheel. trying to make it as even as possible around the shank that we made, with the black on the top and the yellow on the bottom. Just kind of spread it out and you're just kind of working it, get it where you want it to be. Now I'm going to start the reverse threading and the reverse tie with the thread. And this is really where it all comes together in regards to how the head of this fly acts and how it looks in the water, how it pushes water, how it doesn't get too flat. It undulates and creates that vortex behind the head in the tail where a lot of that action is going to come from, where the fly is going to kick. So this is the other thing too. This thread kind of creates a little bit of a bulk in front of the bucktail, which I also like because it really makes it durable. We're going to use some more glue here. It makes it durable. It creates a nice head on it in front of that bucktail, where it kind of supports that bucktail over time as you're fishing it. So as you can see, the flare in the head as it pertains to the middle of the head and the tail. You know, as you can see, the tail's laying back, as I described earlier. It starts to build up, build up, build up, and that flare in the head is really coming into its own right now to get that action that we want. And you could obviously put eyes on here and some two-part epoxy or that instant epoxy with the light. I'm not going to put eyes on this fly. So as you can see, it's laying back, and we're going to run this under the sink and just kind of show you what this is going to look like. But this actually came out with the balance of the head to the body to the tail. It came out really well, in my opinion, of making this particular style fly over the years. So we're just going to whip finish it. All right, so we're back, boys and girls. I just ran over to the sink to kind of wet this, and my assumption was correct. That's really how it's going to kind of look in the water column. As you can see, the tail a little bit thinner than the head, a little bit of good sized bulk, and that bulk in the front is really when you're stripping it through the water column. It doesn't flatten too much because you want it to push water, and then when you pause that strip, it kind of that bucktail undulates and that tail kicks, and that's when I believe you get a lot of action strikes and trigger strikes on esox. But that is pretty much it. That's your basic Fire Tiger articulated pike fly / musky fly. And again, this is about 8 or 9 inches. This would be just as good for musky. You know, this is a really good all-around easy tie. You could learn this in a couple tries. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can go to pogopike.com and reach me there, or my Instagram is just pogo_pike, which I'm going to have a lot more short videos on there, as well as a lot of fishy content over the winter and 2020. So happy fishing in 2020, guys, and thanks for watching. Please either forward this to a friend or give me a subscribe. It would really help me out, and I hope this video helped you today.